welcome to Murder.
And everything else.
My name is Joy.
And my name is Cheryl. And Joy and I are two very, very, very old friends who are going to talk about murder and everything else.
Yay!
Yay!
Welcome back, everyone.
Yes. Welcome back, Kata.
This is a quick reminder, just jumping right into our disclaimers, that this podcast is not for children.
No, it's not.
So make sure that they've got those earplugs in if you start listening to this around them. I have to just tell you, oh my God, speaking of earplugs, before we go into highs and lows, I just have to share this with you because it's hysterical. My in-laws are visiting this last weekend, which was so awesome. We haven't had them out here for over 2 years, so it was super, super fun, super awesome. Very short trip, but totally worth seeing them. We had a great time. So thank you. I like to call them the Outlaws. So thanks to the Outlaws for the quick trip out here. We had a great time. But I discovered that neither one of them are listening to the podcast, which I was just, horrified.
Tisk.
Yeah. So I downloaded a free version of Spotify or whatever. I got it on my father-in-law's phone. I showed him how to subscribe and follow, which explains why we're up to 59 subscribed followers. Thank you very much. And the other thing, and this is so amazing and cool, and maybe I'm the last person who's learned this, but did you know that hearing aids now are Bluetooth? So he could listen to our podcast through his Bluetooth hearing aids.
That's so freaking amazing.
It was so freaking cool. We're in the car and we were going to watch a dance performance that our oldest daughter was in. And he's listening to the podcast because I can hear faintly like, bah, 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 and you and me talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that is so great because when he's on a plane and there's all this ambient noise, you can listen to something and not have to turn the volume all the way up because it's going through your hearing aids and they're already in your ears. So what a genius invention. Yes. Again, I don't know if this, I don't know if this was invented 15 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 minutes ago, but it is the coolest flipping thing. So anyway.
That is amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just have to say, like, my mind was completely blown.
Well,
so if you have a hearing aid and you think, oh, I can't listen to podcasts because I can't hear very well. Hey guys, newsflash, you can get Bluetooth hearing aids and listen to this podcast through your Bluetooth hearing aids.
Amazing. I'm hoping that technology will be able to help, blind people with their sight. That would be awesome. I don't know how that's done. I'm not the genius, but that would be cool.
Wait, I just want to ask, but there's nothing wrong with blind people's hearing.
No. I know it has nothing to do. Shut up. It doesn't have anything to do with the other. I'm just saying that I hope that technology somehow helps the blind see because.
Oh, okay.
Stop it.
You had me really going there for a second.
Oh my God. Well, wait. I have to say something. I have to interject with something. You know what's hilarious? Just talking about the sight hearing connection. When I watch a foreign film, and first of all, I'd rather read subtitles than watch a dubbed film. I cannot stand that.
Because I hate dubs.
Not only do the lips not match, and it's like watching a bad dubbed martial arts movie, but I want to hear the inflection of the actor, the original actor speaking in their own language. So I'd rather read subtitles. But what I do is hilarious because I'm reading the subtitles, but I'm like, I got to turn up the volume, even though I can't understand what they're saying.
That's funny.
And I'm reading it, but I think it's more because I want to hear their inflection,
Yeah.
But I have to laugh at myself because it's like you're reading it. It's like you can't understand what they're saying. Anyway, I seem to have some kind of fucked up thing with the hearing and the sight.
Well, I will say that I love to watch foreign films and I love to watch films in Spanish. But what happens is that I have found that I start to correct the translations and then I find it incredibly distracting because now I'm hyper focused on did they translate that correctly?
Yeah.
And then now I turned into Joy high school Spanish teacher where I'm like, nope, that's wrong, that's wrong. And now I can't enjoy the film because whoever's doing the translation it's wrong and it's so aggravating, and then I have to shout out every time to Gabe, that's wrong, and he's like, could we just sit back and enjoy the flippin' movie? Well, anyway, let's roll into our highs and lows. Oh, you want to go first?
Of course I do, but I'm going to break my own tradition, and I'm going to go with the high first because my low is kind of low, and I don't know if I can flip it around and go to a high. So my high is something that I shared with you, and that's jury duty. And no, I didn't go to jury duty, but it is like a mockumentary or whatever you want to call it in the style of The Office. It's the same creators as The Office, and it's on Freevee on Amazon. So it has commercials, but it's so good. It's I'm not spoiling anything by giving you the synopsis, which is it is a documentary style of a jury trial, and everyone from the janitor to the judge are actors except one person. And it's so delightful. And I know you and Gabe started watching it, right? Did you finish it?
No, we've been watching 2 episodes a night. So tonight we're going to watch the last 2 episodes, but I also turned the family that I work for onto it, and I think they binged the whole thing.
I binged it.
It is so freaking the guy jumping up and down on the bed.
Oh my god. Yeah, we can't spoil anything.
Oh my god, it's so good, right? And then what is up with that girl's bathing suit? Like is that even a bathing? Like she needs to win a whole box full of Emmys because she first of all, her hair with the clippies and whatever.
And her deadpan eyes.
No, she has a crazy eye. She literally. Oh.
I love her. She was one of my favorites. And what I do with any movie or show that I love, I stop it in the middle of it and I'll go cast of, and then I'll go and look them up. And she was the first person I looked up. And then I'll finish watching it, and then I'll go back to the making of, behind the scenes. I love all that stuff. And then I'll always go to the casting. And yeah, she's incredible. We don't want to spoil anything, but there are phenomenal actors in this. And they're given a scenario and what the highlight has to be of that day to take it in a certain direction, but they don't know how this person, who's a real person, not an actor, is going to react. So these actors have to be very good at improv. They have to.
And can we also give a shout out to James Marsden, who plays himself and is so hilarious.
He plays a kind of effed up version of himself.
Yeah, he plays James Marsden. But he plays like super self-absorbed, like movie star. Oh, he's so funny. And also, you have to watch it. I gotta tell you, I love finding little gems like this.
And
I really do.
I gotta tell you, there's so many recommendations I've gotten from the podcasts I listen to. And so I was listening to A Funny Feeling. I just started listening to this, binge listening, because they've had it for years. So I like that because there's so many. But I think it's one of the actors, or look at me. Oh, I researched the cast and everything, and I don't know who he is. But he came onto that podcast and he talked about it, because this was from before. I'm binge listening from years, so it was probably from last year. I don't know. I'm catching up. But he was on the show. I don't know if he was a behind the scenes or an actor, but he talked about it. And so I thought, oh, that sounds like an interesting concept. I would never have found, I would never, even if I came across it on Amazon, I would never have watched it if he hadn't described what it was. And he said about James Marsden, because you were talking about James Marsden, he goes, that guy is a freaking star. He goes, he walks in the room and you're like, oh yeah, that's a star. He said he's just incredibly handsome in person, which he's incredibly handsome on screen.
Oh, it's funny. I don't find him that handsome.
Oh, I do. That jawline and those eyes.
I don't. It's so funny. You have such a type.
No, that's
I don't find.
No, listen, because he looks nothing like Jason Momoa. I'm gonna call him Mimosa. He looks nothing like Jason Mimosa, or far from Idris Elba.
Yeah, because he's got his pants on through. Because he's got his pants on through the whole video. And just for those of you who are curious, it's not just on Freevee. It's also on Amazon Prime if you have a Prime membership.
Yeah, well, Freevee is on Prime, I think.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's like
look at that.
Like a subsidiary subculture. I don't know.
That reminds me of when Heidi says in the online gaming episode, 2D, like she was talking about 3D, 2D, and 1D, and you go, oh, Tubi. Yeah, I've heard of that. Like the TV streaming service, Tubi. I'm all, and I just kind of skipped over it.
You did. I wish you would have corrected me, because it wasn't until you published it.
Well, you legitimately sounded like you were about 85 years old when you said that. It was hilarious.
I was like, oh, she said, it was so funny, because it wasn't until I listened to it back that I went, right away, I was like, oh, she said 2D. But I didn't hear that when she said it live. Oh, my God. And you were just like,
hilarious.
Oh my God. Anywho, you guys have got to watch this show, and I am so excited. Joy, you got to text me after you finish watching the whole thing, because
I hope they continue doing it. I hope they keep doing this, because it is so genius and so funny.
Well, I was thinking how people are going to know the concept, right? So how are they going to continue? But Ashton Kutcher used to have that Punk'd series, and they were doing it, So
what about Jackass?
I don't watch that.
Well, I gotta tell you, I'm sure you know this, because we lived in Portland, and because Jackass was on MTV back then and very popular, but my husband's 15 Minutes of Fame came on the show Jackass. He was in one of the episodes.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, you did too. Come on.
No, I didn't.
It's the one on, I think it's Division. Remember that Hawaiian restaurant called NoHo's?
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah. Remember, you could order like the regular plate and the blah plate, which was like 2 scoops of everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'd roll out of there. I mean, just the normal food there was so much food. You could have like food for 3 meals. Well, he was at NoHo's, and they were recording the blind guy who's tapping the cars with the stick and hitting the cars really hard. Then he gets into one of the cars and drives away, and Gabe's in that episode. If you go to YouTube and Google it, Jackass, blind man with stick, you'll see him. He's right there. He had to sign a disclaimer and everything for it.
Oh, how fun.
And you'll totally recognize him, because obviously he's very I mean, his hair was bright red back then.
Yeah, you won't. Well, even if he's sitting down, he is very tall, people.
Exactly. You is very recognizable.
Red hair. Yeah, so you'll be able to recognize. There's something about that, the feeling of that show that doesn't appeal to me. Did they do something with the porta potty and dumping it on someone? Yeah. Okay. Nightmare. Yeah. My nightmare. I think that's probably why I stopped watching them.
He got inside the honey bucket and they tipped it upside down.
No, I don't want to start my day off being nauseous. Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, we gotta move on, but I gotta tell you, everybody, to take a gander over to Freebie on Amazon and watch this show. It is delightful, and I can't wait for you to get to.
Mosey on over.
I can't wait for you to get to the end. Text me when you watched it.
Okay. Okay. Well.
So my low is that I had an incident the other day. I'm not going to go into detail, but it triggered a past trauma, and I laid in bed all day yesterday with my dogs. Yeah, so it kind of brought me down the last couple of days, and probably going to go lie down after we finish recording this. I'm like pulling up my bootstraps, and the show must go on, and we need to do this recording. But I got to tell you, it brought me down. It brought me to my knees, this incident. And then as you and I were talking, it's very troubling to me that whenever I share it with what has happened in the past, I don't share it with everybody. It's not like but when I become close to someone and then just within living, something comes up and I share it, they always have a story. And it's very troubling to me how women have had trauma in their past of abusive or sexual nature, of violent trauma. It's and then that brings me down. That a lot of times I'm a little bit hesitant to share it because I don't want to overwhelm them, or I don't want to quote unquote shock them. And then they come back with they share their own story, and I'm like, whoa, it's very sad how common it is for women to have experienced some sort of trauma in their life. Yeah, so having to deal with men, I'm not bashing men, but it is what it is. So that's my low. That's my low.
I'm sorry. I will say that I'm glad that you were able to go and lay in bed with your dogs, though. I bet, one, your dogs really enjoyed that, and
Yeah.
two, what a nice, I mean, what a not opportunity, but I'm glad that you had that safe space to go to like kind of help you, like, work through whatever it is you were going through.
Mm-hmm.
And then for people who are listening, if you've gone through something like that, or you are, remember to take care of your mental health, and remember to take a mental health day if you need to, or take a mental
Mm-hmm.
health week if you need to, or go crawl in bed with your dogs or cats, or reach out and talk to somebody about it. Look for a therapist or a counselor or social worker who can help you. There's lots of people out there who work on sliding scales, so they will take whatever it is you can afford, and they're interested in helping people and helping them work through traumas. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
glad that
yeah.
you were able to
Good
take that
advice.
time.
Yeah, yeah. I always kind of feel guilty about just I always feel like I need to do something productive, but yesterday I was pretty down and out. So I was like, nope, I'm gonna have to just give into it and just do what I need to do, which was nothing. So no,
Right.
I take that back. When I'm feeling down, I like to watch spooky movies
Oh
and
God.
slasher movies. And I know I'm not the only one because my ladies on My Favorite Murder, they say the same thing. Georgia Hardstark says when she's feeling down, she likes to watch a depressing movie. I don't know what it is, but it's a common theme, and so that's what I did yesterday. Anywho, it's not that I'm
Well,
recommending that as a treatment.
right.
But anyway, thanks, Joy, for the advice.
Yeah. Well, I am going to start with my low today, which is we had to take our 100-pound German Shepherd to the animal hospital. He's not eating or drinking, and uh for those of you who don't know me, my husband is a veterinarian. So that's why we never take our animals to any veterinarian, because he does whatever care they need at home.
Mm-hmm.
But he also he works at, he doesn't work at an animal clinic or a hospital. He works somewhere else. And so he can't do like a workup if your animal needs care outside of just maintenance. And so this is something that he can't take care of at his regular job, so or during the daytime. And he did come home early yesterday and just to check in on Bruno and give him some pain meds because he's clearly in pain, which makes me so stressed out.
I know.
And then he also doesn't like to ride in the car, so I had to get him into the car, and then he had to ride, it's like 15 minutes, 20-minute ride, and he cried the whole way there. And he's a big dog, but he's just a baby and he's such a love. And so when he's not feeling well, this is the first time he's not feeling well, other than when they chopped his balls off, which was a long time ago. So, and that they give you pain meds and they're fine in a few days. Plus, they're puppies. They're like a year old when that happens. Right. So they bounce back. I imagine, I don't know, because I'm not a baby and I wasn't circumcised. And thank God I didn't have boys because I would not have been able to do it. But I can only say that, like, I mean, you ask a 40-year-old man if he remembers his circumcision, he's going to most likely say no. And it didn't scar him in any way other than, on his junk, because he doesn't remember. He was like 3 minutes old when they took that junk and cut it off or whatever. So it's the same thing with the neutering. He doesn't remember. And he wasn't in significant pain after that. But anyway, so that's my low, and now I have to
I'm on sorry. I'm
on pins and needles.
I know.
I'm like,
I know.
The only other thing I can really equate it to, and for those of you out there who have kids and have animals, and you love your kids and your animals very much, when I had to take my kids in for shots when they were babies and they would cry. I mean, they would wail because, it was never one shot. It's always like 200 to 600 shots. So sometimes they would bring in like 2 nurses and they would do 2 shots in each leg really quickly. Oh yeah. And I would tear up and I would start to cry. And maybe it more accurately describes my mental state of health at the time or whatever, but it was really hard for me to do that. And I remember asking my husband if he could, because he was going to vet school at the time, so he was always very busy. And I would ask him if he could please come with me because I couldn't hold her and cry and her cry. And then there's they have to tell you, like, you put your leg over this part and hold their arms. And I'm like, and
you're
also
restraining them. Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was hard for me, really hard for me.
No, and I get it.
Maybe I just maybe I'm too much of an empath or something, or maybe I had postpartum depression, whatever the case may be. I don't know what, but like I literally wanted to cry at the vet today when I was leaving, when she walked out of the room with Bruno to take him to the back. And I'm like, no. He's never stayed at a doggy hotel before. Like, I'm like, and he's going to be so lonely and scared and depressed.
Wondering what's going on. I know. I cry every time they have to, like,
it's so awful.
And that moment when they're being led away by someone other than a strange, kind of a strange, it is like heart. I mean, it like stabbed me in the heart when I watch my dog being walked away by someone else. That moment is just, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I hope he's okay.
Yeah, I hope he's okay too, and I know he's in good hands. But I will say, then we have another dog. So when I came home without the other dog, and the other dog's like, "Where's the dog?" And then she crawled up my ass and won't leave me alone. Because she's like, "Where's the dog? Where's the dog?" And she's like, she won't go outside. She won't. And I'm just like, get off my leg right now. Like,
or is she happy because she doesn't have any competition? Is that what it is?
I don't know.
I don't care. Just get off of me.
I'm so glad she doesn't have subtitles, because I literally would be like, I'm clicking out of this movie as we speak. So that's my low. And my high is, I had a lot of highs, guys. A lot. but I'm going to go with this one because I already squeezed in secretly the one about my in-laws. But it wasn't so much of a secret. But anyway, I went, and speaking of mental health days, my youngest daughter took a mental health day yesterday. We played a little bit of hooky. It was done honestly because I thought the girls had a dentist appointment, which they did not. And it made no sense for me to take her to school, only to turn around and go pick her up 2 hours later and yada, yada, yada. So she took a day off. I found out that the dentist appointment was not a dentist appointment, that I was wrong. So I took her to do a little like mom daughter time. We spent a little time together. We had lunch. We did a little shopping, got some groceries. Aww. And she drove because she's learning how to drive. So she did a lot of driving. So that was nice. And I found a bathing suit. And for those of you who are over a certain age and have a little junk in some of the trunks, you know that not all those trunks are in the same place. So like one lady might have a little junk in her back trunk. Another lady might have a little junk in the front trunk. Another lady might have a little junk in the leg trunk. Yeah, right. Every lady's got different junk. My junk is not a classic junk. So finding bathing suits over a certain age
is horrible.
Is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not kidding you when I say I have purchased no less in the last 5 years, no less than 3,500 bathing suits and had to return them for whatever reason. The front's playing peekaboo, the back's like playing, lockdown, or you got a situation where you're pulling stuff out of a crack, and or you sit down and all of a sudden it's like, woohoo, look, the cows are getting out of the barn. I mean, it is so ridiculous. So I found a bathing suit. Now remember, I hate trying stuff on.
Yeah.
And so I didn't try it on. I just eyeballed it. And when I got home, I only had to alter it with my little trusty sewing kit in 3 places. Mm-hmm. Because remember, again, they cut these things for everybody's junk, and my junk is different. Mm-hmm. So I had to alter it in 3 different spaces, but it was only $20, and I got a bathing suit, but I literally held it up, and I realized when I was in high school, we had a fashion show, and there was this guy who was like a year behind me who was kind of like muscly, and he wasn't very tall. He was real muscly, kind of broad, like built like a wrestler. And someone said, we need one of those like middle-aged like lady bathing suits with the skirt and stuff. So I remember sneaking upstairs into my mom's room and getting this bathing suit out of her drawer, which had like a full skirt, a full like undercarriage piece. Like the bust was built out with like these like steel belted like enforced torpedo encasements, and he wore it in the fashion show, and my mom had no idea until she saw our yearbook, and obviously she's like, that looks like my bathing suit, because I took it back from the show and snuck it back into her drawer. So
was she mad?
Was she mad? Well, I don't happy. I don't think she was happy. But I literally, no, Cheryl, I looked at this bathing suit and I was like, oh, Jesus, take the wheel. This is the same exact bathing suit that my mom had upstairs some 40 plus years ago. I mean, it was just like that sinking feeling that like, I remember distinctly telling everybody who was within earshot that I would never own a bathing suit like that. And guess what? I have one.
In time, we all have a bathing suit like that.
Yeah. And I need a bathing suit because like in 3 weeks, my husband and I are going away on a trip because it's going to be our anniversary. And I need to have ample coverage for all of the cows in the barn and also for all of the junk.
I've never heard the cows in the barn reference. Well, oh my God.
So, if you see a man who has his zipper down and he didn't realize that he left it down, what you're supposed to say is,
oh my God, stop.
What you're
stop. I can't decide what's grosser, the porta potty on the being dumped on the guy or the cows in the barn.
What you're supposed to say is, looks like the cows are going to get out of the barn.
Oh, Lord.
But unfortunately for me, I've never had a chance to use that.
Until now. But you don't have any cows, but that's okay.
Right. But, I think it's still a funny saying.
It is.
So anyway, my high is that I found a bathing suit. Cows, junk, all that shit staying inside, but I found the bathing suit.
I'd swim in a moo-moo if I could.
They have a bathing suit called a burkini, and it's designed for Muslim women, and it provides coverage from your ankles to your wrists.
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like about it. If I cover up that much, I'm really calling attention to the fact that I don't, not comfortable with my body. You know what I mean? Like we're going off on this, but
I don't care about showing my body. I just don't want the cows and the junk hanging out. I want everything tucked in where it's supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
On that note, let's head over to shout outs. I just have to do a quick shout out for Francoise in Sunnyvale, who texted me to tell me how much she loves our podcast.
Yay.
And we love hearing that from all 59 of our subscribers. So thank you, Francoise, for listening to our podcast.
Yes.
And thank you for loving the podcast. That's so awesome.
Well, I have to give a shout out to my old coworker. The one that we lasted 3 weeks at that job. His name's Craig, and he has his own podcast, and it's called Truth. Oh, look at me. Black and White, Truth and Logic. Oh, man. I'm going to give him a shout out for also giving the wrong name of our podcast, and now I can't even remember his. But thank you, Craig. He mentioned it on his podcast, and he called it he's like, my friend has a podcast and she was encouraging me to do mine, and it's called Everything and Murder, something like that. So I texted and I was like, hey, thanks for the shout out. You almost got our name right. It's Murder and Everything Else. But he's like, oh, shoot.
Oh my God. That's hilarious. So Everything and Murder just saw their subscriptions jump by 90%.
Yeah, okay. Wait, hey, I also have to say something else about, so Francois pointed out to us there are macaroons and macarons, right?
Yeah.
And I just want everyone to know, I do know that. I don't want people to think I'm that stupid, but the thing is the macarons are those colorful ones that are super in now. It's like you see.
But Americans call them macaroons.
Everyone calls them macaroons, and macaroons are those coconutty. They're almost like a cross between a candy and a cookie. But yeah, that's what I was talking about. And we went to a fair.
Americans are basically don't get me started.
No, it's just I think because macarons it sounds weird and it sounds wrong, right? So I think everybody says macaroons. Anyway, I just wanted to say we went to a farmer's market and someone had a stand there, and if you're listening, which there's a hell of a chance she's listening, they were $3 for one little macaron. You know how small they are? I was like,
I don't even like them.
They're really sweet, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, they're very sweet, and they look, you know what else I don't like? I don't like petite fours, and that's what it reminds me of. It's very pretty, but it's not as delicious as it is pretty.
As it looks. Yeah, it looks like something from Willy Wonka or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So we better get it moving on.
That's right. Guys, so we are headed back to murder this week. Cheryl has put together a fascinating and thought-provoking and interesting document. So I'm going to let you take it away, Cheryl.
Okay, so we're going to bring the mood down a little bit. or a lot, and everyone knows this case. It's the killing of Trayvon Martin. And I wanted to talk about it because of the stand your ground laws and how I am on the fence about that and when it's used, you know? Anyway, so Trayvon Benjamin Martin was the son of Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, who were divorced in 1999. He was a junior at Dr. Michael M. Kropp High School, and he lived with his mother and older brother in Miami Gardens, Florida. Oh my God, Florida again. No shade to anybody who lives in Florida, but Casey Anthony was Florida. On the day he was fatally shot, he and his father were visiting his father's fiancée and her son at her townhome in Sanford, Florida. She lived in the retreat at Twin Lakes, a gated community that Trayvon had visited several times before. According to his autopsy, Trayvon was 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 158 pounds at the time of his death. And the other person involved in this is George Michael Zimmerman. He was born in Manassas, Virginia.
I think it's pronounced Manassas.
Manassas. Here we go again with the Ms. Bang, me bang. Manassas? Is that what you just said?
I think it's Manassas.
All right. Manassas, Virginia, and is the son of Gladys George, born in Peru, and Robert Jr. Sr., a retired Virginia magistrate.
Robert George Sr.
Robert George Sr. What did I just say?
Robert Jr. Sr.
Oh my goodness, this is gonna be a long one. Okay, so Robert George Sr., not Robert Jr. Sr., is a retired Virginia magistrate. At the time of the shooting, George was employed as an insurance fraud investigator. He had been working toward an associate degree in criminal justice at Seminole State College. In one of his interviews with the police, he said his goal was to become a judge, which is very interesting, because I think he judged the whole situation. Anyway, at the time of his arrest on April 11, 2012, George's height was reportedly 5 feet 7 inches and his weight was 185 pounds. George and his wife had moved to the retreat at Twin Lakes in 2009. So this incident takes place on February 26, 2012. Trayvon Martin, 17 years old, he's returning to, again, his father's fiance's apartment at this apartment complex. He had gone to the convenience store to buy a bag of Skittles and a bottle of iced tea. So Trayvon was noticed by George Zimmerman, who was a neighborhood watch volunteer. George contacted the non-emergency line of the Sanford Police Department and mentioned that there had been burglaries in the neighborhood and told the dispatcher that he had observed a quote-unquote, a real suspicious guy who was quote-unquote walking around looking about. I'm sorry, I have to laugh because God forbid you walk around and look about. Anyway, George also described Trayvon as someone quote-unquote up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. The dispatcher communicated to George that the police did not need him to follow Trayvon, but George nevertheless left his vehicle. He later said he had done so in order to ascertain his location by taking a closer look at a street sign. A violent confrontation ensued, and George fired his weapon at Trayvon at close range, killing him. When the police arrived, George argued that he had been assaulted by Trayvon, who was unarmed and fired in self-defense. Concluding that they could not hold George because no evidence contradicted his version of the event and because state law permitted the use of deadly force in self-defense, I'm getting already mad, the police released him. In the following weeks, as George remained uncharged, the shooting drew increasing attention. On March 12th, the chief of the Sanford Police Department affirmed that no criminal charge could be filed against George, mainly because of the absence of probable cause. A day later, however, a Sanford police investigator assigned to the case recommended that George be charged with manslaughter on the basis that the violent encounter could have been avoided. George remained free, which was seen by many as an injustice, and demonstrations demanding his prosecution for murder were organized in cities across the United States. In April 2012, the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, appointed a special prosecutor for the case who brought a criminal charge of second-degree murder against George. So remember the Ahmaud Arbery shooting?
Mm-hmm.
They also weren't charged for weeks. It didn't hit the media for weeks after the shooting. And then once people heard about it, it was like, are you freaking kidding? Self-defense.
Well, and I also feel like, because remember, one of the guys either in the truck of the guys who ran down Ahmaud Arbery or someone behind him, he was running, out for a run. They recorded what happened on their cell phone.
Yeah, and
And if it hadn't been for that footage,
they would have
those
gotten
guys
away.
probably would still be out, but like I guess they felt like their weird vigilante racism style, like hunting this kid down, was going to somehow, I don't know, uh talk about huge lapse in judgment. But
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
don't
these guys were, I mean, I wonder sometimes, like, were they like the dumbest, like,
yeah.
rocks in the pile, or what's
Mm-hmm.
up?
Thank God they were stupid. Don't even get Kevin started on the Ahmaud Arbery. He gets so angry. That guy, Roddy, with the crazy haircut with those bangs. He was the one that the father and the son were chasing Ahmaud first, and then he was in his garage and he just thought, oh, what's going on? And it joins in and he videos the whole thing and then he presents it to the police like, look, I recorded the whole thing, as if
Yeah.
it's going to defend them. It's going to like
Exonerate
argue
them
that, yeah,
somehow.
exonerate and justify what they did. And they were like, holy shit. And so they are where they belong. But
Mhm.
anyway, it's just, in that case, it did not. Yeah, and just imagine if they hadn't been recorded, just like George Floyd. If we didn't have people recording, imagine what would have happened. These people would have gotten off. It's incredible. So anyway, for a while, George was not brought to. It was not charged. And then his trial, which began more than a year later in June 2013, received intensive media coverage. The prosecution argued that Trayvon's death resulted from George's profiling of him as a criminal and trying to take the law into his own hands. The defense argued that the evidence corroborated George's version of the event, namely that he fired his weapon because Trayvon was attacking him and that he felt that his life was threatened. Central elements of the incident, however, could not be ascertained. For instance, witnesses disagreed on who could be heard screaming for help on a recorded call to emergency services. Although the original criminal charge brought against George was second-degree murder, the judge also gave the jury the option of convicting him of the lesser charge of manslaughter. That's really important to me. In order to find George guilty of second-degree murder or manslaughter, the jury had to find not only that George caused Trayvon's death, but also that he did not do so in self-defense. The issue of self-defense was linked to Florida's law permitting the use of deadly force to defend oneself against a perceived threat, known as a stand your ground law. I'm getting so mad, which was central to debate over the shooting. Instructions to the jury referenced the law, but George's lawyers ultimately did not invoke George's rights under it because they argued he did not have the option to retreat anyway. Really? On July 13, 2013, after more than 16 hours of deliberation, the jury found George not guilty, not even on manslaughter. The judge gave them second degree. He gave the jury manslaughter as an option, and he was found guilty on all of it. So second degree murder and manslaughter. So this
That's
is,
just whack.
I
It's
mean,
just
it's just
straight up whacked. I mean, I can't even imagine.
it's
I I I can't. I mean, yeah, obviously I can't imagine because, we've now had George Floyd and we've had Breonna Taylor and we've had Ahmaud Arbery and we've had, and it's like, um, I think back to Rodney King. I was in high school when that happened. And
yeah.
I remember seeing the footage of his beating and just not being able to even watch it all.
Yeah, me too.
Because it was so horrific. And then the LA riots and
I lived there in LA.
Oh, God.
It was
Crazy.
It was terrifying. But yeah, like I couldn't watch the George Floyd video until the trial. They played every excruciating second of it, and I watched the entire trial. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. So this is George's accounts, okay? Keep this in mind. This is his accounts, which nobody can corroborate. So he said he was driving to the grocery store when he spotted Trayvon walking through the neighborhood. George's father said that while his son was not on duty that night as neighborhood watch captain, there had been many break-ins and he thought it was suspicious that someone he did not recognize was walking behind the townhomes instead of on the street or the sidewalk. George therefore called a non-emergency police line to report Trayvon's behavior and summoned police. The behavior, he was walking. During the call, George told the dispatcher that Trayvon was, quote unquote, coming to check me out. During the call, George told the dispatcher that Trayvon was coming to check me out. A source to the Orlando Sentinel said in May that don't disregard the date, that George told investigators that at one point Trayvon circled George's vehicle and he rolled up his window to avoid a confrontation. I don't know why I don't believe any of this. After telling the police dispatcher that Trayvon, quote unquote, ran, George left his vehicle on Twin Trees because he's what? The police. Anyway, George left his vehicle on Twin Trees and walked down the sidewalk between Twin Trees and Retreat View Circle to determine his location and ascertain in which direction Trayvon had fled. The dispatcher asked if George was following Trayvon, and George replied, yeah. Then the dispatcher said, again, I already said this earlier, but the dispatcher said, okay, we don't need you to do that. George replied with, okay, and stated that Trayvon got away. After a discussion about where George would meet police, the call ended, and George told investigators he was returning to his vehicle after locating an address on Retreat View Circle when Trayvon approached him from his left rear and confronted him. According to George, Trayvon then punched him in the face, knocking him down, and began beating his head against the sidewalk. George said he called out for help while being beaten, and at one point Trayvon covered his mouth to muffle the screams. According to George's father, during the struggle, while Trayvon was on top of George, Trayvon saw the gun George was carrying and said something to the effect of, "You're going to die now or you're going to die tonight," and continued to beat George.
Didn't you say that Trayvon was 5'11", 160 pounds?
Mm-hmm. 100, yep, and George was 158. Yeah. I mean, 85. 185.
Yeah, so he outweighed him by 30 plus pounds. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. George and Trayvon struggled over the gun, and George shot Trayvon once in the chest at close range. George told police he shot Trayvon in self-defense. In the interviews, George says he took note of Trayvon because he was near a home that he had previously called the police about. He also said he was just, quote unquote, he was just walking casually, not like he was trying to get out of the rain. It was raining that day. And he felt something was off about Trayvon. In a reconstruction video recorded by police the next day, George said that after he initially saw Trayvon on Retreat View Circle, he parked his vehicle in front of the clubhouse at the corner of Retreat View Circle and Twin Trees Lane and observed Trayvon go past him and onto Twin Trees Lane, where he lost sight of Trayvon. He stated the dispatcher asked, "Can you get to somewhere where you can see him?" and that he then left the clubhouse parking lot and drove onto Twin Trees Lane, where he parked. He further stated that at one point Trayvon circled his truck while he was parked on Twin Trees Lane. Again, this is George's account. George eventually left his truck and walked down the sidewalk between Twin Trees Lane. Could they not have an easier street? To Retreat View Circle, and gave police an address on Retreat View Circle. He told investigators that he was not following Trayvon, but was, quote unquote, just going in the same direction he was to find an address, but admitted that he had also left his truck to try to see in which direction Trayvon had gone. The altercation began, he said, when Trayvon suddenly appeared while George was walking back to his vehicle. He described Trayvon at different points in the interviews as appearing, quote unquote, out of nowhere, quote unquote, from the darkness, and as jumping out of the bushes. George said that Trayvon asked, "You got a fucking problem, homie?" And George replied, "No."
Okay, time out. No 17-year-old in their right mind in the last 45 to 50 years would have used the word homie. And the reason I know that is because I have a 16 and 18-year-old, and also because homie was something that was being used before I was in high school.
That's like from the In Living Color days. I remember
that is so telling. You got a problem. You got a fucking problem, homie. Come on. I can't believe the jury wasn't like, are you a big liar, homie?
Exactly. I'm telling you. Oh my God. So he says he replied no, and then Trayvon said, "You got a problem now," and punched George. As they struggled on the ground, George on his back with Trayvon on top of him, George yelled for help probably 50 times. Trayvon told him to shut the fuck up as he hit him in the face and pounded his head on a concrete sidewalk. When George tried to move off the concrete, George saw his gun and said, "You're gonna die tonight, motherfucker." Trayvon grabbed for the gun, but George grabbed it first. He said after firing his weapon at Trayvon, he was not sure at first that he had hit him, so he got on top of him in order to subdue him. Bystanders and police arrived shortly after Trayvon was shot. George contradicted his own previous statements as well as the transcript multiple times in the video of the reconstruction. First, he claimed that the dispatcher asked him to see where Trayvon went, despite no such interaction having happened. His claim of Trayvon circling his truck was not mentioned by George in the phone call either, although he did mention Trayvon was looking at him. George then claimed that he asked the police to meet him by his truck, when in fact the dispatcher had suggested this before George asked if they could call him where he was at. George also contradicted his other statements about what happened after Trayvon punched him the first time. In the interview with Doris Singleton, George claimed he was knocked to the ground instantly, after which Trayvon climbed on top of him. Despite this, in the video, he claimed that after being punched, he tried to push Trayvon away from him and moved farther down the path instead of falling instantly. That's a big discrepancy. Mm-hmm. You'd remember if you were knocked down right away or if you moved further down, you know. Police reports state George, quote unquote, appeared to have a broken and bloody nose and swelling of his face. George was offered 3 chances to be taken to the hospital, but declined each time, according to police reports released by the prosecution. ABC News reported that a medical report compiled by George's family physician showed that following the altercation with Trayvon, George was diagnosed with a closed fracture of his nose, 2 black eyes, lacerations to the back of his head, a minor back injury, and bruising in his upper lip and cheek. Investigators questioned the extent of George's injuries and why he didn't identify himself to Trayvon as a neighborhood watch coordinator. George said he didn't want to confront Trayvon.
Also, a neighborhood watch. Okay, neighborhood watch is literally a sign you put in your neighborhood that says we watch each other's houses and watch each other, like watch out for each other. And then also, it's basically a group of vigilante people who get together if there's been a lot of crime in the neighborhood and they decide to patrol the streets themselves. And a lot of times it's because maybe they live in a high crime area or whatever. Yeah. And a lot of times these are people who, for whatever reason, are crazy because they've got nothing else to do and they fancy themselves vigilante style police officers, which they're not. Reminds me of Dwight Schrute from The Office, who was like, remember, volunteer sheriff deputy, and like, I mean, and all he was like a volunteer who showed up and had, you know, like, I don't know, like a bubblegum dispenser in his pocket. I mean, he was like a nothing. And remember, they were like, no, you're not allowed to do that. Nope, you're not allowed to do. Nope, you can't carry a taser. Nope, you can't. You can only carry the silly string. I mean, it's not even a real thing. Like and the neighborhood watch signs, people, and the reason I know this is because we have one up on our street. It doesn't do anything to Crime Stopper. It doesn't do anything to stop crime. It doesn't do anything. Like, all it is a notice that says we look out for each other, which you're going to do anyway if you live in a neighborhood where people are, you know, and nowadays everybody works from home. So every house on our street has somebody living there somebody working from their home every single freaking day and everyone's got cameras and big dogs and guns and you name it. So it's like, I mean, what I don't want to, like, I don't know anything about this neighborhood that these people were in, but yeah, I'm sorry. The neighborhood watch coordinator just means that it's some bullshit. Yeah, it's probably some bullshit title they gave him because they realized that some 40-year-old loser was still living at home with his parents.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna get into this whole neighborhood watch. During a bond hearing on April 20th, 2012, investigator Dale Gilbreth testified under oath that he did not know whether George or Trayvon started the fight and that there's no evidence to contradict George's claim that he was walking back to his vehicle when Trayvon confronted him. However, he questioned George's statement that Trayvon was slamming his head against the sidewalk just before he shot the teenager, saying it was not consistent with the evidence we found. So these are the things I think, do we consider? It's sort of what you were saying. Because I'm sure I didn't watch this trial, but because I already knew the outcome and I was like, it's just going to make me mad. So the Retreat at Twin Lakes is a 260-unit gated townhome community in Sanford, Florida, from January 1st, 2011 through February 26, 2012. So February 26, 2012 is the day of the shoot of Trayvon's death. Police were called to the Retreat at Twin Lakes 402 times. Crimes committed at the Retreat in the year prior to Trayvon's death had included 8 burglaries, 9 thefts, and 1 shooting. Twin Lakes residents said there were dozens of reports of attempted break-ins, which had created an atmosphere of fear in the neighborhood. In September 2011, the Twin Lakes residents held an organizational meeting to create a neighborhood watch program. George was selected by the neighbors as the program's coordinator, according to Wendy, one of the neighbors. It's probably because he wanted to and nobody else wanted to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, I can't help, the thing that jumps out at me when he says the kid looks suspicious was it because he was walking through a predominantly white neighborhood and he was black? I mean, let's face it, it wouldn't be the first time, that happened, and it's not going to be the last time. And the fact of the matter is, if you live in a neighborhood where there's no or hardly any black people at all, especially none that are kids that are just walking around because they went to the convenience store to pick up something to drink or whatever, and you've never seen them, I mean, I gotta tell you, we had Mormon missionaries on our street, and I wouldn't have been more surprised if a two-headed alien popped up, because one, I'd never seen any Mormon missionaries on our street, and two, what the hell are you doing in the dark on, like, winter's night, going from door to door, like in rural North Carolina? Like, you're asking to, like, get shot or to have someone call the cop. Like, that's just crazy. And I told the girls when I went outside to talk to them, I said, listen, you need to go back to your bishop or your town, your church council or whatever, missionary headquarters, and tell them that a nice lady or not so nice lady, I don't know, I don't care what you call me, said, don't go from door to door in rural North Carolina and knock on people at night. I said, you're going to get shot.
Asking for trouble.
Yeah. And these were 2 very wholesome nice looking 18 to 19-year-old girls.
Yeah, they're not thinking from that.
Their organization doesn't give two shits about what those kids are doing. Just get out there and save some souls.
Oh, God. No, it's true. So George had made nearly 50 calls to police between 2004 and 2012 to report various local disturbances such as loud parties, open garage door. Open garage door. He called the police to report open garage door. Okay, potholes and children playing in the street. Hello, 911. There's children playing in the street. Following break-ins in the neighborhood in 2011, George's calls to police increasingly focused on reporting people he suspected of criminal activity. During the months leading up to the February 26, 2012 shooting, George called the police several times to report people he believed to be suspicious. According to friends and neighbors of George, 3 weeks prior to the shooting on February 26, George called police to report a young man peering into the windows of an empty Twin Lakes home. By the time police arrived, the suspect had fled. On February 6, workers witnessed two young black men lingering in the yard of a Twin Lakes resident's home. Around the same time, a new laptop and some gold jewelry was stolen from their home. Jewelry. Some people say jewelry. The next day, police discovered the stolen laptop in the backpack of a young black man whom George identified as the same person he had spotted peering into windows on February 2nd. George had been licensed to carry a firearm since November 2009. So
Bingo!
Yeah, so
I feel like that's the most like, okay, so first of all, remember when we had the episode where we talked about those composite drawings
yes.
of people, and I wouldn't know if the guy had pubic hair taped to the top of his head. I gotta tell you, I call such loud bullshit on him saying, yeah, that laptop was found, that was the same black kid I saw. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. You don't remember who that guy, I don't remember what the UPS guy looks like. And I've lived here for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I couldn't draw a picture of him. He's probably been delivering packages to my house for 10 years. So I don't buy that at all. Well, and also the license to carry a gun. Oh my God. That guy was itching to discharge his firearm.
Yep. He was a wannabe cop. The reason I brought this up about giving detail about the criminal activity or his calls to the police was because should we consider what happened to Trayvon a result of this activity? You know what I mean? Like, do you think the jury, when they were deliberating, considered the heightened fear and suspicion? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you think that they took that into consideration, that he was on high alert because of all these other things that happened? I'm just throwing that out there. I don't agree with this at all. None of this that I put into this document states the fact that Trayvon was wearing a hoodie. Remember the whole movement after that? After it did come out, people were wearing hoodies.
Yeah.
Because
I remember that. And I remember there were schools. Honestly, they probably, I don't know where the schools were, but I have my idea of what they were like.
Mm-hmm.
But they were saying that they weren't allowing their students to wear hoodies with, and put the hoods up on their heads. They had to,
Amazing.
And just like kids back when I was in school, boys weren't allowed to wear baseball caps, into the classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
They said they were making the kids take the hoodies down. And here's the thing. It's like, Trayvon Martin was killed by someone shooting him with a gun. Okay. He wasn't killed by a hoodie that strangled him. He wasn't killed by wearing something over his head. He wasn't killed by a laptop in his backpack. He wasn't killed by a sippy cup that he got from the 7-Eleven. He was killed by a bullet. So again, very similar to like a lot of these schools that are like, oh, we've put in metal detectors and cameras on all of these school shootings. The kids aren't dying because of by being hit by cameras. or by metal detectors falling on top of them, or TVs falling out of windows and slicing them in half, or pianos falling out of the 10th floor and crushing them to death. They're being killed by bullets.
Yep.
So I feel like we need to think about the actions and consequences. And it seems pretty basic. Like, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says you have kidney cancer, we're going to have to take a kidney out. So you do that, then you take all the medicine and you get the radiation, you get the chemotherapy and blah blah blah. But what do? They take out the thing that you know what I mean? So, like, let's do some really basic math. If there's millions of if there's hundreds of school shootings every year, should we shut down the schools? Should we make the kids stop wearing hoodies? Should we buy baseball caps? And should we get like locks on doors and these giant doors that weigh 600 pounds that are bulletproof? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, I feel like I feel almost like it's a joke. I feel like people are, excuse my French, fucking around. It's like, I get it. Like, let's come up with a million different reasons and a bunch of different things to like throw at the problem. If you're making cookies and you need baking soda, don't go out and buy um um Coca-Cola. You got to buy baking soda. Don't go out and buy, vinegar. You buy the thing you need for the cookies. So if you got a bunch of kids dying because bullets are being discharged into them,
it's
then
not
what should we do?
hoodies.
Like, it's added up. Do the math. 2 + 2 equals what?
Yeah, it's not about not wearing hoodies. And so do you just going back to my question? Do you think the jury took this into consideration? Like, did it weigh a lot that on their decision that there was a heightened sense of fear and suspicion?
I think that probably the jury was mostly made up of white people, white professionals, or or people who were sympathetic in that area to an increased fear of violence or theft. I believe that they were all people who lived in that area because they all had access to carry firearms or carry weapons. I believe the majority of them were probably gun owners. And so, and then also, there probably wasn't enough evidence, because I feel like basically what ends up happening in a lot of these cases is, remember, again, reasonable doubt. So maybe they didn't have enough, maybe they had zero surveillance video, maybe they had conflicting reports from both the medical examiner or the doctor at the ER, medical examiner for the young man, and all that. Because what they do is they'll take a body, they'll look at where the bullet entered the body and where it exited. They'll look at the injuries on the deceased as well as the person who's alive, and were the injuries consistent with him being in a physical altercation and being hurt. Maybe he feared for his life because he realized this kid was stronger than he thought he was.
But again,
but I don't think that the jury, I don't know, do I think the juries don't do right by some cases? Absolutely.
Yep. So I just Googled, I wanted to look up the ethnic makeup of the jury, but this is what I immediately found. Was one of the jurors back in 2013, so this must have been right after the trial. Oh, you're right. The only minority on the all-female jury. Oh, the all-female jury. Interesting. And she was the only minority that voted to acquit George Zimmerman, said that Zimmerman got away with murder for killing Trayvon Martin, and she feels she owes an apology to Martin's parents. Oh, you can't put the man in, she said, you can't put the man in jail, even though in our hearts we felt he was guilty, said the woman. But we have to grab our hearts and put it aside and look at the evidence. Okay, there is a line from Thelma and Louise, which we all know is my #1 movie, where, they go on the run, right? After Louise kills a man defending Thelma while she's being attacked. And they're on the run. And Thelma says to Louise, can't we just, tell them the truth and tell them what the hell? And Louise, who's pretty savvy because she's been attacked, she was raped before in her past, she goes, we can't prove anything. We can't even prove that he attacked you by now. And then Thelma's response is, the law is some tricky shit. It is, because this juror is saying we felt it in our hearts that he was guilty of murder, but in court, it's what you can prove in court. And I hate that sometimes, because by, they're put in, the jury is put in this box, or the evidence is put in this box, and you cannot look out of that box. You cannot think out of the box. So it's what
and when they strike things from the record, you can no longer include that in anything that you are considering. And sometimes there's evidence that they can't prove that it is, obtained in a proper form, or it doesn't pertain, or it's stricken from the record. And so you can only use the evidence that is submitted to the case and that it pertains to the case. And so I will say that, like, I don't want to say that I didn't see the case. I didn't watch the trial, so I don't know. But I will say, just from, I mean, and I will also say that, like, I saw how many times George Zimmerman popped up in the news after this case. Granted, he became a person of interest to the general public because of this case. But I feel like this Trayvon Martin case tipped off a a a lot of awareness. And it's a shame, because there were cases before this. Let's go back to Rodney King, huge example. Why didn't that tip off a tide shift, where people were like, what's happening? And why are young black and brown men being stopped and um or being, brutally murdered, execution style, whatever, reminiscent of, like, how young men were treated in Jim Crow South or across this country, during times of slavery and afterwards. And why isn't that changing? Why aren't we at least, like, I mean, if it's if and why are we incarcerating, like, high numbers of black and brown men? And so why wasn't there a tide shift before? But Trayvon Martin, I feel like, at least for, like, my children's generation, it was the beginning of where we are now with regards to, like, and then, like, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and there are so many others. The man in the subway who was selling cigarettes one by one. I can't remember. It wasn't George Floyd, but it was someone else. And it's just all these situations. And then, I've read op-eds by mothers of young black and brown boys who have autism or on the spectrum, and how they fear to even just, like, let their children out of doors, because they don't act or carry themselves in the way that, like, someone like George Zimmerman would look at somebody who had a disability and think that person looks suspicious. Well, of course they don't act like, like someone who doesn't have autism or is
quote
on the
unquote
spectrum.
normal. Yeah, there was that kid remember that kid that had gone, he had some kind of disorder, and it was a hot night, but he was covered up because he had some kind of disorder that I can't remember what it was, but he basically was wearing a mask and a hood. And he went into a convenience store and he looked quote unquote suspicious, and then he was walking home, and I think someone called in, a suspicious call, and then the police, I don't know the details, but they ended up killing him right then and there.
Terrible.
Yeah, so yeah, and you're right, it's like we went from Rodney King and having the highly publicized major riot after, and then decades later, and we have not gotten any better. We saw the killing of George Floyd. We saw it played out with a cop on top. Like, imagine, and I just imagine all the cases that we don't hear about, but getting back to this,
we have gotten better at, what we have gotten better at, Cheryl, and I just have to throw this out there, and I hope that this does spur a real tide shift. We've gotten better at surveillance. So you can't go anywhere without them knowing, your car drove past this light, or you walked into this convenience store, or 15 people stood and recorded you being brutal. So we have gotten better at that because everyone's got a camera and a recorder on their person and they use it. So maybe that will be the thing that like makes that starts to change the tide as far as recognizing that that you know there is an element of fear sometimes out there, and with people not knowing, maybe not being comfortable with someone who looks different than them, somebody who doesn't fit into their neighborhood, somebody who has a different color of skin, somebody who's wearing clothing that's different, for whatever reason.
Well, so going back to the stand your ground thing, which I have a real, so if you come into, I hate those stories where someone has knocked on the wrong door and they're shot. But if you come into my house and I don't know you, I can shoot you. Mm-hmm. That's my thought. You shouldn't be in my house and I'm standing my ground. But in this case, I just have a real problem with it because George was told not to follow him by the police that were on their way. Okay, so George, you called them, good on you. You called the police, good. They tell you, are you following him? And he says, yeah. And they say, you don't need to do that. So it should have ended right there, right? But he takes it into his hands to go follow this kid. And the kid then defends himself. Now let's put ourselves in Trayvon. So we've given George a healthy dose of a benefit of the doubt that there was fear in the neighborhood, yada yada yada. He was the captain of the neighborhood watch, so on and so forth. But let's put ourselves in Trayvon's shoes. He's walking home. It's raining. I didn't put that out in the beginning, but it's apparently to George, if you're walking in the rain, which some people love to do, that's suspicious because he wasn't walking quickly, because it wasn't running, because it was raining. But let's put ourselves in his shoes. So he's walking home and there's this guy following him. So at some point, he's
remember it was a homie.
Homie, yes. But he's 17. So he's probably now in fear. Right? He's like, what is this guy? Why is he following me? Because in his mind, he's not doing anything wrong, which he wasn't. It wasn't only in his mind. It was for real. It was real. It was, accurate. He was not doing anything wrong. He was walking home from the convenience store, wearing a hoodie, carrying his Skittles and his iced tea, and walking which unacceptable speed to George, because it was raining. So in his mind, he's like, what the fuck? And so we don't know this whole, because it was George's statement that he circled the truck and he came around. However it happened, there was an altercation. Who started it? George. And so I'm sorry, but you're losing the battle and you get to bring out a gun. How about, you brought a gun to a fist fight, and that's not fair. And we'll never know what happened in those last few seconds, but what we do know is that Trayvon was walking home. George followed him. George calls the police. The police tell him, do not follow him. Trayvon would be alive today if he had listened to the cops. So he follows him. He gets his ass beat and brings out a gun. So I have to go into this, what the prosecution says, because I agree with it so much. George Zimmerman was a wannabe cop who profiled his victim, Trayvon Martin, as a criminal and then silenced him with a gun he considered his equalizer, a prosecutor said. Acting as a vigilante who was sick and tired of criminals coming into his Sanford gated community, George made and acted upon wrong assumptions. To quote the defendant, to quote George, these fucking punks, these assholes, they always get away. He uttered it under his breath, and that in itself indicates ill will and hatred. I guess I think he even told the police that. It was like that Roddy guy going, here, I videotaped it thinking it would exonerate him. And, George is telling them these assholes always get away. And he followed him, he tracked him, because in his mind, this was a criminal. He went over the line. He assumed things that weren't true and acted instead of waiting for the police. Why does this defendant get out of his car if he thinks that Trayvon Martin is a threat? That is a very good question. Again, you've already called the cops. Why does he get out of his car? Because he's got a gun. He's got the equalizer. He's going to take care of it. He's a wannabe cop. It's his community, and he's not going to put up with it. And so this young kid is dead. It just makes me so mad. And, in the 10 years since George Zimmerman shot and killed Trayvon Martin, this was in 2022, so last year. So it's 11 years now. He has remained embroiled in controversy. 2 months after his acquittal, George's wife filed for divorce, called 911 to report George had assaulted her and threatened her with a gun. This guy thinks he's like Yosemite Sam or something. George was not arrested after police said they couldn't find enough evidence to press charges. Again, the law is some tricky shit. 2 months later, George was arrested in another domestic dispute after his girlfriend said he pointed a gun at her. And then he sold paintings and they were ripoffs and yada. In early 2015, George was again charged with domestic assault after allegedly throwing a wine bottle at a girlfriend. And again, no charges were filed because the victim recanted her story. In those first 3 years following his trial, in addition to the dramas in his personal life, George was under investigation by the Department of Justice to determine if he'd violated Trayvon Martin's civil rights. But in 2015, the federal agency said the evidence did not meet the high standard for a federal hate crime. Boo. So George, someone fired at George, and then that person went on trial. And George was asked about the Black Lives Matter movement, and his response sparked controversy. He says, "I don't believe Black Lives Matter is a movement, sir. They're terrorist cowards." In May of 2016, get this, George sparked fury when he listed the gun he used to shoot Trayvon on an auction website. He eventually sold it for close to $140,000. In May of 2018, George faced more criminal charges. He was accused of stalking a private investigator who was helping with a documentary on the Trayvon Martin shooting. George eventually pleaded no contest to the stalking charge and got 12 months probation. Most recently, George turned his attention to lawsuits. In 2019, he filed a $100 million defamation lawsuit against Trayvon's parents. Leave them alone. It was dismissed in February 2022. In early 2020, George filed a $265 million defamation suit against 2 presidential candidates for allegedly defaming him in tweets. A year later, a judge dismissed that lawsuit. It's been 11 years since he burst onto the national scene. While he did win his freedom after the trial for the past decade, he has clearly not lived free of controversy. See, to me, his behavior after, it's just concrete evidence to me that he wasn't acting in good faith. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, I'm really trying to protect this community. He's a wannabe cop. He's very gun happy. You know what I mean? That gun gave him a bravado that he shouldn't have had. He called the cops. They told him don't follow him. That should have been the end of the story.
Yeah. I will say that when he filed the 100 million defamation lawsuit against Trayvon Martin's parents,
oh God,
I will tell you that I literally stopped clicking on any link with any story with this guy because I felt like one, he's something of this vigilantista cult, leader for people who maybe are romanticize the things that he got away with. And I thought, there's no way this guy's ever going to get a click from me. I said, he's disgusting. But I will say that, one of the things he probably learned through this process was, hey, if I get my name out there, people are gonna, I'm gonna generate clicks, because I'm somebody who's, interesting or whatever. So, he probably needs to figure out a way to continue to make a buck,
Yeah.
So anyway,
I have and I know we've got to wrap it up soon, but this brings just the conversation about Kyle Rittenhouse, who went to the riots that were in Kenosha, Washington, and he brought his rifle, and he was running around like a. This is where the video game thing. I don't know. Maybe it should be considered. But anyway, he ended up killing someone and injuring others, right? Because they started attacking him. And again, it's like you put yourself in that situation, and then you killed someone, and then he was charged and he was acquitted. It just and there were a lot of details for the jury to consider, and at the very moment when he shot the guys, yeah, they were attacking him. It's the same thing, but what led up to it? But again, this is where it's what you can prove in court, yada yada yada. But Kyle went to the riots with a gun, trying to be, and then when the shooting went down, the cops bypassed him. You want to talk about race? They bypassed him. When the guy had gotten shot and he ran down the street, the cops went right by him because I'm not going to say it because he's white. Because if that had been a black man standing here, he would. Anyway, we got to go because we could talk for hours and hours and hours. But again, there's a problem with my stand the ground thing when you started it. Can you really call stand my ground? I'm defending myself when you started it.
Well, anyway. I gotta tell you that this whole subject, I mean, talk about crime, but you know what else is a crime?
What's that, Joy?
That we are out of time.
Oh man, that's right. Thanks for listening, everybody, and don't complicate your day. Don't do it. Bye.